am so sad. My good friend, the SP 500 index, is broken. It just doesn't work the way it used to. Oh, it's so sad. Hi, welcome everybody. This is Eric, and I want to explain today why the SP 500 index isn't working the way it used to in the past, what it means for you, and what you might want to do about it. So first, why do you care? Well, let's take an example. If you took $10,000 and invested it in the SP 500 index 5 years ago, you would have $21,113. That's pretty good. It's more than double your money. But if you took that same money and put it into the Vanguard Total Stock Market Fund, in 5 years you have $21,643. So it sounds pretty close, right? It's a $500 difference. But if you took that as an annual percentage, it's 0.5%. And 0.5% is a lot. It's like 10 times more than the fees you're paying on some of these index funds. So, and that money can add up pretty fast because it keeps compounding year after year. So the S&P 500 index isn't doing as well as it used to. And I want to explain why. Now's a great time to hit that like button. It'll help me out a lot, and it will help the YouTube algorithm find more videos like these to show you. And if I get a subscriber, I may be able to get enough money to turn this cardboard clock behind me into a real digital clock. Wouldn't that be cool? So when I say the S&P 500 is broken, I'll give you an example on what I mean. That will really bring it home, I think. So December 21st of 2020, Tesla entered the S&P 500 index. And it entered at a valuation of $620 billion, which is 1.5% of the total S&P 500 index. That's a lot. And that huge stock coming into the S&P 500 index meant, as an S&P 500 owner, you're buying Tesla really late. You're buying it really high. And we all know from investing, it's good to buy low and sell high, not buy high and hopefully not sell low. So I hope that Tesla will continue to go up and everybody will get good returns. But the truth is that this big stock coming in as an S&P 500 index holder, you kind of bought it late. And I'll show you a clip of what it looked like on that day. You can see on the December 21st, the volume just surging up to 222 million shares traded that actual day. You can see the pop that happened, from one day to the next with that huge buy. And everybody knew this was going to happen. So of course there's a run up before it went into the S&P 500 too. Well, the same thing happened on January 6th of 2021 when Enphase, which is a renewable energy company, entered the S&P 500. You can see there that the volume again spiked up by a lot more than it's ever been in the past, and probably more than it's ever going to be in the future. And again, S&P 500 index holders were buying Enphase late. They were buying it high. You're like, okay, so we're buying, if I'm an S&P 500 index holder, I'm buying these stocks, kind of late, like Tesla and Enphase. Maybe it's a little bit high, but why does it matter? Well, you have to think about the S&P 500 index and how it's actually constructed. You see, it's what's called a market-weighted index. That means the bigger the company is, the more shares you actually own. So Apple and Microsoft, which are at that top, 3 to 4% of the index is for Microsoft. 3 to 4% is also allocated towards Apple, those $2 trillion companies. So the larger the company is, the more money as a percentage of your pie that's allocated towards those companies. So when a company comes in late with a large market cap, you're forced to buy a lot of it. Whereas if a company came in with a small market cap, say, a few billion, then you wouldn't buy so much of it. And as that small company rose up over time to a bigger and bigger market share, and the S&P 500 index would start to buy more and more shares as that smaller company grew bigger and became a larger piece of the pie in the S&P 500 index. The S&P 500 index is not an equal weighted index, which means every company in there has the same equal weighting. You can buy equal weighting indexes, but those tend not to perform as well. You can take a look at it if you're interested. Is this going to continue to happen in the future? Well, let's take a look at a bunch of companies that aren't in the S&P 500 index. Let's take a look at their market capitalizations they have today and take a look at companies that are already in the S&P 500 index that are smaller than these potential new additions. I'll go through this list, and this is just a list I thought of off the top of my head. So starting off with Airbnb, it's in hotels. It's valued at $127 billion. That's bigger than Hilton or Marriott. Square, right, that's in finance, $116 billion, and that's bigger than Goldman Sachs or BlackRock. Snowflake, software database company, $68 billion. That's bigger than Akamai and VeriSign combined together. Modera, health, $71 billion. That's larger than Veritex or Biogen. DoorDash, convenience, $68 billion. That's larger than Chipotle. Roku, home entertainment, $60 billion. That's bigger than Dish and Discovery. Wow. Pinterest, media, $54 billion. That's bigger than Electronic Arts or Viacom, CBS. Affirm, recent IPO, that's in finance, $33 billion. That's larger than Discovery or First National Bank. Unity, 3D and games, $35 billion. That's bigger than Akamai or VeriSign. And Ubiquiti, which is network equipment, $21 billion. That's larger than Hewlett-Packard. So these are just companies I thought off the top of my head, and they are much bigger than their peers in the S&P 500 index. But they're not in the index because they haven't had 4 quarters of consistent profitability. Now, I'm not saying that all these market valuations are justified. Some of these companies may sink in valuations a lot. They may not survive into the future. But gosh, there's a lot of them. And these companies are going to keep coming. As new disruptive technologies come up, companies are going to go for market share and trying to gain users over being profitable. There's plenty of private capital to help support them to do that. And I think you're going to see more of these companies shift towards profitability as they get to a majority of the market share. And as they shift towards profitability, they'll be added to the S&P 500 index. Unfortunately, the point that they'll be added to the S&P 500 index, they'll be massive, right? They're not going to be S&P 500 stocks, they'll be like S&P 100 stocks, right? And you're buying the S&P 500 index, not the S&P 100 index. So the S&P 500 index, as these companies start to become profitable and start to enter the index, like Tesla and Enphase, are really breaking the index. And I don't see these new gigantic companies, the pace of these new gigantic companies slowing down. I see them continuing to be there and continuing to enter the S&P 500 index with massive market capitalizations. And that means holders of the S&P 500 index have to purchase large amounts of these companies when they enter because they are so big. So we went over these companies entering the S&P 500 index late because they reached profitability late, even though they had a large market cap. And as you can tell from my presentation before, I really think this is a flawed criteria, that having these companies enter when they're so massive just because they recently reached profitability is really hurting this S&P 500 index. But now the question is this a recent change? Has it always been like this? And I feel this is a change, that the markets are really changing. And let me explain why I believe that to be true. First, there is a study from the National Venture Capital Association that found that 85% of venture capital companies are acquired and only 15% go through an IPO. The second thing is I found an interesting piece of evidence in this Bazinga article, which I'll share in the links below. And it has this quote from Jason Paltrowitz, EVP of Corporate Services at OTC Markets. And OTC are the non-publicly indexed companies, but are still traded on a different market. You commonly refer to as things like pink sheets and things like that. And what he said is, generally, this is what Jason Paltrowitz said. He said, the general theme for a number of years, and this has come from exchanges themselves, is the concept that exchanges are no longer adequately serving the needs of the small and medium enterprise market. He goes on to say, the general consensus is that the type of company that makes sense to be on an exchange is significantly bigger than it used to be. So we have this survey from venture capitalists and also this quote that tells us that these companies are really massive when they're going to these IPOs. And going public is really kind of an onerous thing, which is very difficult to do unless you have this huge market valuation. If you're smaller, what tends to happen is you get acquired by other public companies. Well, that's a change from before. Before, if you were profitable and you were growing, you would want to tap those equity markets, and one of the only ways to do that was to be listed on these exchanges, and it was also seen as very prestigious to be part of these exchanges. Well, that's changed. And again, you can go back to this Bazinga article, but in the late 1990s, there was 8,000 publicly listed securities. And then when we got down to the 2010s, there was about 6,000 publicly listed securities. Fewer and fewer companies were being on public exchanges. They were going private, they were being acquired, and there weren't new companies coming to fill the gap. As these number of companies dwindled, all you were left with were these mega cap stocks. And, as we've seen, the venture capitalists prefer to pump up and provide private equity for companies so they grow and grow and grow until they're massive, and only then do they go onto the public markets. And these venture capitalists, they have a much different way of thinking about things. The way they think about things is they want their companies to have a majority of the market share because they want a massive amount of profits. They want huge winners. And they want that massive market share and then go get profitability later. Well, that's a change from before. So now today, there's much more money in private markets. There's much more money in venture capital that's pumping up companies and encouraging them to grow their market share rather than being profitable. The question is, what can you do about it? Well, the simple answer is look for broad-based index funds and understand what the criteria are that allow them to be in those funds. If you have funds that are requiring profitability as part of the company, then that fund may not be performing for you. So instead, look for funds which are just buying sort of based on market weight and buying across the broadest range of companies possible. You really want that diversity, you want that broad reach, because you're going to pick up these companies as they go public, like a Uber or a DoorDash as they go public day one, and you're going to follow them up even though they're not profitable because you have an index that's holding stocks regardless of whether they're profitable or not. An example of such an index would be the Vanguard Total Stock Market Fund. And the Vanguard Total Stock Market Fund also prioritizes large IPOs and getting them into an index pretty quickly, like within 12 to 20 days. So they do a pretty good job of adding them in, whereas other indexes might wait until a quarter. So you should go through and look at the selection criteria for your index and figure out whether the index is the one that you really like and you understand how it works. That's one of the reasons that I like the Vanguard Total Stock Market Fund, because it does have a priority process for large IPOs and trying to get them into the index as quickly as possible. And the Vanguard Total Stock Market Fund is just a true market-weighted capitalization. It's an index fund that just picks up small companies as they enter and then follows them all the way up. It's broad-based. It has about 3,000, 4,000 companies in it. And that's the reason that I like that index over, say, an SP 500 index, which I believe has this flawed criteria that no longer allows, that doesn't allow you to buy huge market cap stocks because they're not profitable yet, which is really a shame. If you already have a lot of money in the SP 500 index, you shouldn't sell. I mean, the SP 500 index is still good. What I would recommend is, look at rebalancing, right? Maybe have a plan or strategy for that. If you have all your money in S&P 500 index, you might want to rebalance it and put it somewhere else, and have a more balanced portfolio. The other thing that you can do is, if you have Vanguard funds and you have all mutual funds, you can set one fund to be the recipient of all your dividends. So you could make a Vanguard Total Stock Market Fund your new investment vehicle for all your dividends. So as your dividends come out of your S&P 500 index, you can put them into a Vanguard Total Stock Market Fund index. That way your S&P 500 index doesn't keep growing, but rather the income or dividends that are kicked off from that S&P 500 index are put back into a different index. Now, I know you can do this in Vanguard, but only if you have all mutual funds. If you have a brokerage account, you're not going to be able to do this. You're going to have to do it manually, where you have your dividends off to the side, they're not reinvested, and then periodically you would have to go in and move them into someplace else. So that's another thing you could do. But I wouldn't make any drastic moves. As I talked about in the beginning of the video, the difference between these two indexes, the Vanguard and total stock market and the Vanguard SP 500 index, is not huge, but it is worth your consideration. It's worth your time to figure out where you want to be and what you want to invest in. Me personally, I do have an S&P 500 index just from years past, and I just keep it there, and I don't do anything with it, and I just leave it. And I try to put all my new money that I have coming in, working, and put that in the Vanguard Total Stock Market Index. That's what I try to do. So it's just something to be aware of, and now that you know about it, you can make good plans around it. I hope this helped and it was an informative video. See you later. Bye-bye.